Hello and welcome to the Underhive. We are back with some more How to Command the Death Guard. Now, as it goes, this isn't so much how to command as just well done William Meibusch for a first place win with the Death Guard at the No Retreat tournament on the 18th of November. So firstly, well done William for the first place win. I think with the Death Guard that is an achievement in and of itself. But a bit more to that, in my opinion, in that it isn't the Plague Marine spam, 40 to 60 Plague Marines. It's a very balanced list as it goes, including Mortarion, which, as it stands, I think Mortarion is in a bit of a difficult place. It's such an expensive model with terrain that isn't always going to protect him. In fact, very few pieces of terrain actually hide him. And all that, particularly from the Votann, but shooting, ignoring invulns, and just ignoring invulns generally, turning off rerolls, things like, say, Be'lakor, can really do a number on Mortarion if the dice go that way. So to bring this particular list and come away with such a result, I think it is a phenomenal achievement. So again, well done, William, there. Really think you've done a great job. But let's take a look at the list here. A little bit of analysis I can throw in. I wasn't at the tournament. I haven't seen the games played. So this is mainly guesswork. But I think from the way the list is laid out, there are a few sort of directions that seem more obvious. So there is a Supreme Command, of course, for Mortarion, and an Inexorable Plague Company Battalion. So going for the second Plague Company there, and some interesting choices in the way that the CP has been spent. So as far as the Supreme Command, no surprises there. Gone for the 1 CP for all 3 Warlord traits. Great value because they are great Warlord traits. So Revoltingly Resilient, Living Plague, and Arch Contaminator, as well as Gloaming Bloat listed on the list here. So of course the Contagion Warlord trait that's selected is at the start of the game, so you can mix that up a bit. But given Ferric Blight's already in the list, I think Gloaming Bloat is the obvious choice for Mortarion. 9-inch range, it's not an aura, but 9-inch contagion range of you can't reroll hits and wounds, you can't overwatch, and you can't set to defend. Can really catch certain armies out and turn the tide just by being nearby. So yeah, great layout for Mortarion there. And then as far as the Battalion, so 2 HQs, keeping them rather cheap. Got a Lord of Contagion with the Plaguereaper and Unstable Sickness, so potentially a few mortal wounds coming out there from the Lord of Contagion. And then the Malignant Plaguecaster, interesting pick, going for the Putrid Periapt for the extra known spell. So as far as spellcasting, Mortarion's got Miasma, Pestilence, Plague Wind, and Gift of Plagues. And the Malignant Plaguecaster has Miasma of Pestilence, Putrescent Vitality, and Curse of the Leper. So, of course, the damage output available from both on Curse of the Leper and Plague Wind. They both have Miasma of Pestilence, so wherever you want to get that -1 out, I think Mortarion's quite an obvious choice for that if he's in range to get shot. But there are going to be times where you want to protect that bloat drone or want to protect those Plague Marines, whatever it might be. So the Miasma, of course, nice to have the flexibility for 2 different casters to be able to use it. And then we got the buff in from the Malignant Plaguecaster and the option to extend the Plague range or the Contagion range with Gift of Plagues. Now that isn't likely to be going on Mortarion so much as a Tallyman with Ferric Blight, but we'll come back to him in a minute. But as far as the HQs, I think quite clear cut. Lord of Contagion very likely going in up the middle or perhaps striking in some games. Malignant Plaguecaster probably there supporting the middle and got that mortal wound output as well, just to support in the death dealing. As far as the troops, got a squad of 10 Plague Marines, mostly kitted out how you'd expect, with one surprise in there as far as I'm concerned. So we've got the Champion with a Fist and a Plasma Gun, 2 Blight Launchers, 2 Cleavers and 2 Flails, pretty run-of-the-mill. 1 Mason Axe, 1 Plague Spewer, which is an interesting pick, not sure how viable that was overall, but an interesting pick. And 1 Melter Gun in that squad as well. So got a little bit of shooting in there and a good mix of the melee as well. And then 2 squads of 5 Plague Marines, probably as you'd expect. Plasma Gun and Fist on the Champ. 1 Cleaver, 1 Flail, 1 Mason Axe, and 1 Melter Gun. So good mix of melee profiles and a little bit of ranged output there from the Melter and the Plasma Gun. 2 squads of Poxwalkers, 1 squad of 11 and 1 squad of 10. So most likely they're going to be just doing the annoying thing, screening out the back line, holding the home objective, scoring the spread the sickness. And then in the elites, we've got a squad of 3 Death Shroud, just as they are. So this may be a support in striking with the Lord of Contagion in some games, otherwise can just act as a protector for some of those characters. And of course, no mean slouches in melee. They've got those Plague Spurt gauntlets, only listed as 1 on the champion, but given that there's no... whatever it's called, his chimes to extend his contagion range, I imagine they're probably playing 2 Plague Spurt gauntlets, just not listed there. But again, a little bit of shooting, a little bit of melee output, not as much as it could be for a 5-man squad, but certainly able to strike in with that Lord of Contagion in the backfield if it feels relevant for a particular game. The Lord of Contagion doesn't have any of the Contagion upgrades or anything, so I think that is a nod that the Lord of Contagion may well be striking in some games. We got the Foul Blight Spawn, as you'd probably expect, with a Revolting Stench Vat and Viscous Death. So he's got that 6-inch aura of you don't count as charging, don't count as fight first, and essentially, unless you're going to be making the Death Guard battle line fight last, if you charge into them and you're in that range, you're just giving the initiative over to the Plague Marines, kind of like a free interrupt. So always great value for just 1 CP on that relic. And then the Viscous Death upgrade, just to re-roll the shots on the Sprayer. Sprayer is a very potent weapon when you get a lot of shots, so being able to re-roll that, obviously a great upgrade for 5 points. And then also a Tallyman. And I think the Tallyman, and the way that it was probably used, is quite different to many of the other lists that have placed well recently. There is no Contempt to Dreadnought in this list, and a Tallyman, particularly with the Tollkeeper upgrade, is very common to see alongside a Contemptor, particularly with those Volkites for the Exploding Sixes and the +1 to hit for a core unit, of course. This Tallyman, I don't think is going to be sat up at the back. He's got the Ferric Blight Warlord trait, so he's increasing the AP to any enemies that are within range of the Ferric Blight Contagion, and he's got the Plague Skull of Glothila. So that's the single-use mortal wound grenade, essentially. Happens in the movement phase. It's not a shooting attack, so it can target characters without Lookout Sir, or without them getting the benefit of Lookout Sir. And of course, it happens in the movement phase. It's a great tech to have in there for those phase damage. So the Catans, Abaddon, Gazgul, some Bloodthirsters. Always nice to have the Plague Skull of Glothila in there. I don't often put it on a Tallyman myself, but it's certainly a nod here that this Tallyman would be up there on the front lines. Now, we've already been through all of the core units here, so there is still a bit more to the list, but we've already been through the core units. There is no Contemptor. So, given the Death Shroud only have those Sprayers at range, they're only getting the +1 in a single phase in melee. Because they're not rolling a hit roll. So I think chances are the Tallyman was probably in support of this 10-man Plague Marine squad where possible, giving them the +1 to hit both in the shooting and the fight phase. There's not a ton of shooting there, all said and done, but that Melter with a +1 to hit, when it does get through on the roll that it needed for that +1, that Melter shot is going to feel quite potent and worthwhile. So I think probably in support there. And of course, when they're in melee, the Cleaver, the Fist, and the Mace are all going to be -1 anyway. So having that +1 bringing them back to 3s can be very nice, particularly if they're supported by full rerolls, and there's nothing denying that. 3s, full rerolling for those weapons does feel very, very nice. Even with just reroll 1s, if they're not the target of Mortarion's Chapter Master, 3s rerolling 1s is still a much nicer place to be than just hitting on 4s. But of course, for the likes of the Flail, that's going to put that to hitting on 2s. So even if they're not getting full rerolls, even if they're just nearby the Lord of Contagion or nearby Mortarion, the Flails at least are going to be 2s rerolling 1s, which feels very good into a variety of targets. Rounding out the list, we've got Affected Bloat Drone with Flesh Mower. Always great to have at least one. The mobility it brings, the threat it brings to lighter infantry or lighter vehicles out on the flanks. Very, very good for clearing up one flank and allowing you to then focus on the other. Also a great recipient for the Flash Outbreak. So you may well be seeing a Flash Outbreak on the Tallyman's ability, bringing the Ferric Blight, the additional AP around with the Bloat Drone, and perhaps allowing some of that shooting to be that bit more potent. Always nice, backed up by the Plague Burst Crawlers. We've got 2 Plague Burst Crawlers with Entropy Cannons and Heavy Sluggers. Of course, they've got the Mortar built in. They have to take that. Perhaps shooting out of line of sight here. If you can get a Bloat Drone over the top, get that Ferric Blight in range through the use of a Flash Outbreak. Those mortars, even though they're out of line of sight, kind of evens out the out of line of sight penalty there as far as the AP. So that could be a solid use of that. But again, Plague Burst Crawlers, they're great for just screening out the opponent and taking shots as needed. They're a big base, and of course they can screen out from opponents looking to strike in as and when needed. And then we've got a Chaos Rhino as well. So there are a total of 20 Plague Marines there. So the Rhino does open up that opportunity to have 10 of them in the Rhino, disembark turn 1 for that extra 3-inch move, and then an easy advance, if not a move, towards the central objective, looking to score some points as soon as possible from turn 2 onwards. I think that's probably best suited with the 10-man squad, just with the expectation being you probably lose a few models, but you can cut away the chaff and leave yourself with the more potent melee weapons that you expect to need in the coming turns. And that would then allow the 2 squads of 5 to embark into the Rhino, and then of course the Rhino can move off towards some other objectives, ready to score later in the game. So I think overall, a very, very balanced list. It's got a lot of tech, a lot of ability to switch up the game plan depending what you're into. You don't need that extra AP. You don't need to lump in on the Flash Outbreak for the Ferric Blight. You can just use it as and when it comes up. But in those games where it is going to be really important to take out that back line, let's say we've got some Astartes on a back objective, you don't want to be giving them a 3-up save with that what's called Plague Burst Mortar. So if you can get a Ferric Blight in there, firstly, if it's on the Bloat Drone loves chewing up Astartes infantry, but again, with that extra AP, going to be that bit more effective. Ultimately, the use of 2 CP for an interrupt is very, very important for the Death Guard. So this particular list starts on 1 CP. So by the time you need it, you are going to have the 2 CP that you need for an interrupt, as long as you've not frittered it away on any command point rerolls or perhaps an early Flash Outbreak. But again, there's a time and a place where that might well be more potent, particularly with the Plague Burst Crawlers in there. There is that shooting that can come up clutch. Plague Burst Crawlers can be quite swingy, but when they work to your advantage, they can really get some work done. So I think the opponent there has to be wary of that. And just asking that question, just making them aware, you know, by the way, I can spread that AP out. Suddenly, these Votann are going to be on 6-up saves rather than the 5 you're expecting. You know, you've not brought the Invul Madness Votann League. Then ultimately that can put the opponent in tougher situations, just mentally, even before any dice have been rolled. So I think very, very good list, nice list building, quite unintuitive in the way it's been gone about. The Tallyman looking, in my opinion, to get up close and personal rather than sit in the back line supporting a Contemptor. I think it's just a really interesting way to play some of these models, and evidently very effective. Now, I haven't looked up the actual games individually in which particular factions William came up against, but come in first place, you'd expect he's beat everybody that's come up against, and certainly you'd expect to have some of the top tier factions in there. So to have come away with a first place there, I think is phenomenal work, William, and a very interesting list build. Let me know what you think. Have you got anything else to add there? If you know exactly what happened at the tournament, do feel free to get involved in the comments. Quite happy to continue the discussion with you afterward. But otherwise, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time in the Underhive.